and I'm about ready to throw the whole thing out the window. But I'm
Wonderful. We're talking about technology, not any one of us in particular. Welcome to Susie McMahon's virtual book club with our wonderful group expert, Donette Dunaway Lee, and Melissa St. Clair, who keeps coming in, but she's frozen still. But I'm going to move forward and let everybody join us slowly as they trickle in while I say hello to John and welcome you back because you did a brief introduction with Dana Ridenauer, didn't you? Way back a few months ago.
I did, yes.
So welcome back, John Warley. We
Thank
all
you.
had a wonderful experience reading The Southern Girl, and I'm going to see if Melissa can talk. If you can't, I'm going to go ahead and read the bio.
Yeah,
No.
fine.
All righty. It's all good. I'm glad you're here with us tonight. So I'm going to read John's bio. John Warley, a native South Carolinian, is a graduate of the Citadel and the University of Virginia School of Law. He practiced law in Virginia until 1993 when he moved to Mexico to write and teach. Now a full-time writer, Warley divides his time between Beaufort, South Carolina. Hello, I'm down on Fripp Island, so I'm just waving up to you. And San Miguel de, how do you say, Allende?
Allende.
San Miguel de Allende.
Allende. You both said
Allende.
it beautifully.
I do.
Mexico. His previous books include Bethesda's Child and The Moralist. He and his late wife, Barbara, have three sons, Caldwell, Nelson, and Carter, born in Newport News, Virginia, and a daughter, Mary Beth, born in Seoul, South Korea. Welcome, John. How are you doing tonight?
Thank you, Susie. I couldn't be better, and I couldn't be happier to be with you all tonight.
Thank you. It looks like Melissa's back. Let's see if we can hear her real quick.
Good evening. Yay.
Whoa.
The tech gremlins have abated, hopefully.
So you must have a 10-year-old in the house somewhere that helped you out.
No, you know what? I switched over to my mobile hotspot, but my regular internet said it was full strength. Who knows?
Well, I'm so glad you're here. And at that note, I'm going to take my my beach wet hair and I'm going to watch from the background, y'all. I'm at Fripp Island, and I want to just say real quick, Shoshana Williams has joined us. She's saying hello from Dallas. People that have not, people that have joined us, sometimes it just says Facebook user. You need to give StreamYard permission to use your name. Otherwise, I don't know who's making a comment. But someone said, hello, I love this book. The description made me feel like I was right there in the story. And also we have a special request. Please read from your book. But at that, I am going to turn this over to Melissa, Donette, and John. And I'm going to be behind the scenes tonight. Have a blast.
Awesome. Thanks, Susie.
Hi, everybody.
And thank you, Donette, sister author, and John. It is so good to see you again. We were all in the Low Country together just a few months ago. It seems like a long time ago now, but what a treat that was.
Well, yes, it's the Low Country is always a nice place to be. Sometimes it's a little cooler than it is at other times, but you know, we've had some rain here this week, and all is good.
That's awesome. Well, if you don't mind, before we dive into A Southern Girl, I'm going to segue to a little question from the Low Country Literary and Leisure Getaway. So John served on the panel, Friends of Pat Conroy, and that was just a treat. What did you think of the experience?
Well, I always, you know, enjoy discussions built around Pat. He was and is such a larger than life character. I miss him desperately, as I know all readers do. And so anytime I have a chance to talk about Pat, I enjoy it. and especially a chance to talk with him, as we did many times in the book world, giving presentations together and ribbing each other about our work and that sort of thing that you do. So I miss those days.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing those reflections on that great getaway that Susie put together. Donette, do you have a question?
Well, I would like to start talking about the theme of the book, which for me primarily seemed to focus on international adoption, that I understand is a part of your experience.
Very much so.
I wanted to ask you, as I was reading and hearing the conversation back and forth between Elizabeth and Coleman and their disagreement or inability to get consensus on that adoption. Elizabeth expressed that in her letter to the agency. And I wondered whether or not an agency would accept anything less than unanimous opinions about that.
Well, that's an interesting question. I think if the agency had a basis to think that there was real turmoil or strife within the home, they would certainly have some second thoughts. But in the real world, Barbara and I underwent a home study done by the social services in Newport News. And this is the part of the book, the part one of the book is largely autobiographical in many respects. It certainly reflects the attitude of Barbara about the adoption and my attitude, which I'm not particularly proud of, but or not proud at all, because it was somewhat closed-minded and somewhat bigoted in ways. But that's part of the involving process. But what the real world situation that we faced was that we had gotten this call from the adoption agency giving us the date and time that the flight carrying our daughter would be landing at JFK. And we were told to meet this plane. It was in May we got the call, and we were supposed to be at JFK sometime in June. And so we obviously made a note of it. And I think it was on a Thursday afternoon we got that call. Friday morning, we got the call from Barbara's doctor saying we were expecting another child. And Barbara turned to me immediately and she said, "Don't worry, it'll be a boy." And it was a boy. But the point is, and the reason I started down this trail was, we then, a week or two later, had our home study by the social service. And the question was, do we tell them that we are now expecting another child? Because even more concerning to the adoption agency, I think, than some discord in the house over the adoption would have been the presence of two babies in the house at one time, which is what we were looking at. And we had actually known a couple who had gone through the adoption process to adopt, I believe it was from Korea, and they got their adoption canceled when the agency found out that there were going to be two infants in the house at the same time. So we didn't want to take that risk. So we decided that the newly arrived pregnancy was really none of her business, and so we took we weren't going to take any chances. So.
Well, how old was the baby from Korea?
Well, when Mary Beth, our daughter MB, we call her, when MB arrived, she was 6 months old.
I see.
She weighed 9 pounds. She was very emaciated because she had this this medical problem, which I describe in the book. That's all very accurate. I described it as best I could remember it. The night we brought her home from JFK, we put her to bed. It was dark. It was late. We were all tired. I really didn't, Barbara was being very possessive. I really didn't get a chance to much hold the kid until the following morning when I went into her bedroom and picked her up out of the crib and put her on the changer and took off her sleep diaper and all, and then got a chance to look at her. And the first thing I noticed was this scar that started under one breast. Wow. And went back almost to the, not the middle of her back, but a good long way, and a second scar underneath it. And we had no warning that this was, that she had any problems and you could see the suture marks in it. So I didn't have to be a surgeon to know she'd had an operation. And we had already scheduled an appointment with our pediatrician in anticipation of her arrival. So when we brought her in, I will never forget the comment our pediatrician made. He turned to Barbara and he said, "Barbara, if I were you, I wouldn't get too attached to this child." And that, of course, hit the panic button. And so he picked up the phone and he called a pediatric cardiologist in Norfolk. And we were in that doctor's office the next day. And he said, "I can't tell you if it's heart or lung, but this child's had major surgery. So do you have any records?" I said, "No, I didn't know she'd ever had surgery." So at that point, I put in a pretty pointed call to the agency saying, we've been really blindsided here by this. And they went into action, and a week or 10 days later, it wasn't too long, we got a fax from Korea in English and Korean that explained to us that, yes, she had this, there's a strain of pneumonia that they have in Asia that we don't have here. And it's about 99% fatal unless it's diagnosed and treated with this one antibiotic. And so the scars were a biopsy of her lung to determine whether she had that strain of pneumonia. And she did. And so they treated it. They took her to the children's hospital. They treated her for 30 days with this antibiotic. And by the time she got to us, she was fully recovered except for these scars. And the doctors over here said, if an American doctor made that kind of an incision for a lung biopsy, they'd have their ticket pulled. But that's the way they did it in Korea. And the only thing, we were just very relieved that this wasn't going to be some long-term problem. And since that time, she's been healthy, with exception of some of the usual ailments. She's never had any repercussions from that. So.
And how old is she now, John?
My gosh, she's 42 now.
Wow.
She's married, lives in San Diego, California, and is living a good life. I saw her a couple of months ago.
Fantastic. So while you were telling that story, Shoshana came in with a question. Were there differences in your daughter's saga? Was your daughter's saga similar to Allie's or differences? So I think you were talking about the parallels just now.
I was, and I would say that again, part one, up until the time that Elizabeth gets sick, which is part two, part one is pretty autobiographical. I thought the adoption was a bad idea. I let my feelings be known. I knew that it was going to create a lot of angst in my family, my more extended family, and it did. Um, and but at the end of the day, I went along with it. Parts two, where Elizabeth's illness, and then ultimately the resolution of the story in part three, where Allie's in high school and all of that. That's fiction, cut from largely whole cloth. I mean, we moved to Mexico. My daughter and my son, that we took the two younger children with us to Mexico when I wrote A Southern Girl. And so they went to Mexican schools and had a great experience in Mexico. None of that's in the book because it wasn't relevant to the story I wanted to tell. But that was kind of the way that shaped up.
Well, I was wondering, as far as part two is concerned, I'm assuming that Saint Simeon is fictional.
The Saint Simeon is actually thinly disguised fiction from the Saint Cecilia Society in Charleston.
Well, I was going to ask because Saint Cecilia is mentioned in beach music that I just noticed, and so I was wondering what the parallel was.
Yes, well, we had a funny situation with the Saint Cecilia. My dad, because we come from an old Charleston family, my dad was eligible to join the Saint Cecilia. He never would. It drove my mother absolutely insane. I think she never forgave him for not joining, but I joined in my 50s. I joined, and the first year I took my wife, and the second year I took my mother. And she had never been to the ball, and she was thrilled to finally get there. But one thing I noticed when I walked into my first St. Cecilia in the Hibernian Hall there on Meeting Street in Charleston, when I tell you it's white and ethnically pure, believe it. And it occurred to me, what would happen if this Asian girl who had been entitled theoretically to sort of make her debut and to Charleston society, what had happened if she walked in there? So that was a lot of the motivation for the story. I only stayed a couple more years and then dropped my membership, but it was a real eye opener to walk in there in whatever year that was and find that it was. So in the actual St. Cecilia, it's all men. You can only get in through the male line, and the board is male, and it's very male. And I made the St. Simeon kind of more egalitarian in that way.
Well, John, it is in high demand if you are comfortable to read a passage from A Southern Girl. I did not want the book to end, so I would love to, along with the rest of the viewers, hear a little reading if you're okay with that.
I'm fine. There is a paragraph. I could read more, but there's a paragraph in the book that I'm very fond of, and writers may deny it that they have favorite paragraphs, but I don't mind admitting it. I'm a big boy. But this comes about I'm looking at maybe 2/3 of the way through the book, and it says as follows: an orphan adopted at birth is not so much a mirror as a prism. Look at her directly, and you cannot see yourself looking back. Instead, you will see refracted in facets cut by her unknown jewelers the pale inks and dyes of your behavior, culture, and station melded among and into the iridescent hues of her genetic weave. Trace the rainbow to its source and behold nothing more varied than a sanctified shaft of light, God's random sunshine, beamed at another's cradle, but diverted by grace to yours. And I kind of felt like that paragraph summarized, in a sense, my feeling about this adoption, because I maybe any adoption, because I watched my sons grow up from the day they were born, and I traced their mannerisms and their personalities and their physical traits, and what was more like me and what was more like Barbara. Well, you can do that with a biological child. Then you get this 6-month-old question mark dropped into your lap, and you have no idea who she favored, father or mother, what she's like. It's all a big surprise as she develops, and you get to note those things. And so I really did. I felt like my kids, my biological kids, were more like looking in a mirror, and looking at MB was more like looking in a prism. It was just a different, she's different. And we celebrate her differences, and she celebrates them. She used to, her term for her brothers were the biologicals, and we all we all had great fun with that. And she's a great kid.
Well, we have an international adoption too in my family, and I would love to know the page number if you can locate it, because I really want to share that paragraph. It was beautifully written.
Well, thank you. And of course, I just closed the book on the paragraphs, so I will send it to you as soon as we conclude, because I don't know that I can put my finger on it again. But
that's perfect. We'll drop it in the comments so everybody has it as a reference.
That'd be good. Or else I could reread the book.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So are you working on anything right now that you can talk about?
Yes, I can talk about it in a limited degree. I have been writing now for 30 years, and I just finished my 7th book, and I always swore that I would never write a legal thriller. I thought it was a crowded genre. John Grisham owned it. And I just thought, I said to myself, there are other things you can write about. Don't leave the legal thriller alone. And then the way things go, I got an idea one day, and I said, this might be something. So I started it. And once you start it, it's hard to put it down. So anyway, the short answer is I just finished a legal thriller. I just sold it, and I will have some more word on it in the coming weeks. But I'm very excited about it, and I think it's going to be good. But you always think that.
That's so great! Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
That's one of my favorite genres. So I
is it?
Forward to it. Yeah.
All right. So I've got at least one sale here on the line. I like it.
Donette, do you have another question? If not, I have another one in the queue. So go
We got
for it.
just one little item I wanted to know. I was fascinated with Marguerite, and her name, I want you to pronounce it, because when I was in Columbia, South Carolina, I had the hardest time learning how they pronounce Huger. There's a street by that name.
Yeah. Marguerite Huger is her name. And that is the French pronunciation, the French Huguenot pronunciation of Huger.
In Columbia, they call that Huger Street.
Yeah. Okay. Huger Street.
Well,
yeah, I think
they southernize it.
I think the H technically is silent, and it's just UG. In fact, when Audible bought the rights to make an audio book of a Southern girl. The characters who were going to do the narration, they asked me if I wanted to narrate it. And I recorded a 2-minute tape of my own voice. And then I played it back. And I said, no, I don't want to record this book. Leave it to the professionals. So the professionals emailed me. They were very nice. And they said, do you have any advice for us when we are narrating the book? And if I'd been thinking, I would have said, there are a few Southern pronunciations in there that I think you ought to know about, because otherwise you're going to say something like Hugger Street, which is, and you couldn't blame them, because what do they know, right? They're not in South Carolina. So
Right.
anyway.
Oh,
Thank you for that.
Oh my goodness. So here is another question. What gives you the most enjoyment as a writer?
I enjoy the process. And I mentioned a minute ago that I had been writing for 30 years. And the only reason that I have been able to, of course, for many of those years, I had a full-time law practice. So it was not like I was off in some ivory tower writing all day. I didn't have that luxury. But I kept writing, and I kept writing for years after I had anything published at all. And I got enough satisfaction from just the process of producing words on the page that I said, this is something important to me. If I'm never published, that's the way it goes. If I am published, that'll be fun. That'll be great to have some readers. And but I enjoyed the process so much that I wanted to stay with it, and I still enjoy the process. I remember, maybe I've told the story before of my experience with NPR, but I had been writing for a long time, years, never had anything published, and I was, as I say, riding back and forth to my office every day. I played the radio, I played NPR, and one day I heard that NPR was starting this new program called This I Believe, and they invited you to submit a 500-word essay on anything you believed. And if your essay was selected, they would let you read it on NPR. And I said, well, that sounds pretty cool. So I was sitting around my house one day. This was about 2003 or 4. I was sitting around on a Sunday afternoon. It was raining. There was nothing else to do. And I said, you know what? I must believe in something. I think I'll write about something I believe in. So I sat down and I wrote this 500-page essay, and I emailed it to them as instructed, and I never heard a word from them. They didn't even acknowledge the receipt of my email. I said, well, that's that. And then I started hearing on my commute home, I started hearing people reading their stories, This I Believe. And I said, gosh, I submitted something to that, and they never even acknowledged my existence. 2010, I got an email from NPR saying, now this is 6 years later, we want to publish your story, and for your convenience, we've attached it below. And I thought, well, hallelujah, because I couldn't remember to save my life what I'd written about or believed in 2003 or 4. Believed about strongly enough to write about it. And I see my great friend Mark Powell has joined us, and I'm so excited for you all to meet Mark if you haven't already. He to full disclosure, we're both Citadel Bulldogs. Mark finished a couple of years after me, but he's a great writer, and we were just, Mark, I caught your telecast or whatever that was a little while ago. So I, with Dana, so I got a little briefing on the lioness, but unless somebody else wants to do it, I'd like Mark to give us a sketch of himself and the lioness. I do know we go back to San Miguel de Allende, we go back to the Citadel, and he's now teaching creative writing at App State and has a new book out. So I want him to talk a little bit about that, because I think you all ought to adopt that book going forward. I heard a lot about it in the last hour, and I'm excited to read it. Have not read it yet, but I'm excited to read it.
Well, terrific. Thank you, John. And thank you for that warm welcome. And Mark, welcome to the Susie O. McMahon Virtual Book Club. We are so thrilled to have you here as our surprise guest tonight, and we'll be reading your book in the future. But yes, I will turn the floor over to you to do an introduction of yourself and your book.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa. I'm afraid John is going to destroy his reputation here, so I'm glad he's introducing me after the discussion. John was, I think, a senior when I was a freshman at the Citadel. Around that, right, John?
That's about right. Yep. I remember bracing you a couple of times.
I met John when Story River Books, as you know, this was the first novel they did, and mine was the second. And I happened to look at John's biography, and of course I saw that we both went to the Citadel, but I also saw that he had lived in San Miguel. And at the time, my family and I were about to move there. I was on sabbatical. So it was this just wonderful coincidence, this kind of synchronicity that happened. So I think, John, the first time I met you was right by the Parroquia there in San Miguel. So that was lovely. And I've just been friends with John, crashing in his house whenever possible since then. So,
and you just got back from San Miguel.
Just got back, yeah.
I'm green with envy.
It was lovely. My daughter was 3 when we were living there, and she just could not remember any of it. So we got to take her around and show her everything. So, and maybe that's a decent segue, because part of this book, Lioness, is actually set in San Miguel. And there is also a fictionalized version of John's old friend, the incredibly gifted painter Taller Cranston. Yes, and by just complete chance, we rented a house on Airbnb when we were down there, and it turned out to be the house of an old friend of Taller Cranston, and it had 4 of his paintings hanging in the living room.
Really?
So I walked in, when I was researching this book, I spent a lot of time looking at his work, online. And I walked in and just sort of paused and did a double take. And then suddenly realized by pure chance, I had walked into this house just, a few weeks after publication of this book, full of his art. So it was a really lovely feeling.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just have to tell you that when I took a trip to San Miguel, they gave us a tour of his home while he was still alive, and he spoke to us and showed us the entire house. Every wall, every ceiling, everything was his art. It was.
Donette, have you ever seen anything in your life like Toller's art studio and house? I never have.
It's unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
I just couldn't get my head around it, and I still can't.
There's a YouTube video that takes you on a tour of his house before he died, and it is just jaw-dropping.
Can you find that on YouTube?
I think so. I think I'll try to find it and send you a link to it.
Okay.
It's about I think a 4 or 5 minute tour of the house, and for anyone for whom Toller's name is not familiar, he was the 6-time Canadian men's figure skating champion,
right,
and won a bronze medal in men's figure skating in the 1976 Winter Olympics. But when he retired from skating, he devoted himself full-time to art in San Miguel. And his art is, once you see a couple of his paintings, you'll never forget them, right, Mark? I mean,
his art is absolutely stunning, and it's unlike anything I had ever seen before. And Donette, I'm so jealous because I never got to meet him. He had tragically passed by the time I got there, but I have heard from so many people, not just John, but other folks as well, about his just incredible generosity of spirit. And actually, he is in the book. He's a minor character, but one of the main characters is an artist, and he is her benefactor. He's giving her a place to stay in San Miguel while she works on a project.
Really? Well, quick story. Tyler used to have a standing policy. If you showed up at his door at 9 o'clock in the morning, anytime Monday through Saturday, not Sunday because the staff was off on Sunday, but if you showed up at 9 o'clock, he would come down or have one of his employees come down and open the door, and anyone who was there could come in and have breakfast with him. And I ran into these 5 Canadian women in San Miguel one time, and they said, "You know Tyler Cranston?" I said, "Yes, I do. He's a good friend of mine." She said, "Well, is there any way we could meet him?" I said, "I tell you what we'll do. You meet me at this address tomorrow morning. I'll see if I can get you in to a very exclusive breakfast with Tyler." And they were there the next morning. The door opened. They thought I walked on water because I got him into this standing invitation that Tyler had. And I'm still in touch. This was like 10 years ago. I'm still in touch with those 5 Canadian women.
John, I hope they're not watching tonight. I hope they don't find out you weren't quite as well connected as you have always seemed.
Oh my gosh, that is priceless. And that though there is so much synergy on the screen with these interviews tonight is by no, coincidence at all either, right?
Well, tell us just a little bit more about the lioness.
Yes, I'm sorry. I got distracted there. Lionesses is the story of, it's told from the point of view of a husband. His wife has probably died in what would be classified as like an act of eco-terrorism. He is blindsided by this event, and he goes back and tries to uncover essentially what happened on the night that it's believed that she passed away. And what he discovers is that his wife had been living a double life with what he thought of as one of his closest friends for the past 15 or so years. So the novel is told from his point of view, and it is his attempt to kind of put together what happened. And he's putting it together through sort of a fog of grief and disbelief as he sort of discovers thing after thing. And it kind of reaches back to their time at San Miguel when, unbeknownst to him, she was with this other man.
Wow. Oh my goodness. We're on the edge of our seat already.
Mark,
well,
you tackle some tough modern issues in this book. I mean, you really do.
Well, I mean, thank you, John. I mean, that's, I know you as a writer, and I saw Dana was on here too, right? What you want to do is, I think, like try to be in conversation with the moment as a writer. And of course, like the writer's first job is always to tell a good story, right? To keep the reader flipping pages. But
absolutely.
Also, it's nice to feel like, we're engaged with the things that are happening. I always think, like, you hear how few people read books, but books are like the last place we have these serious conversations, I think.
That's a good way to put it, my friend. A good way to put it. The last place where we can have serious conversations and not be as divided as we appear to be today.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So we are coming close to the end of our time, but before we close, I would love for each of you, John and Mark, to, if you have a question, to ask one another one question before we close.
Well, John, can I go first here?
Go for it, bud.
For all those years you terrorized me at the Citadel there.
Yep, go for
I want to know what you're working on. And I would also say that one of the loveliest things John has ever written, one of the more moving things, is on a memorial at the Citadel. I stop and see it every time I'm there. It's absolutely beautiful.
The War Memorial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The War Memorial for the war dead there. And I would love to know, John, you write so many different things, from nonfiction to fiction to things that are inscribed on statues. What are you working on now, or what's next?
Well, I don't know at what point you joined us, but I told the group I just finished writing something I swore I never would, a legal thriller.
Oh,
And I just sold it this week. And so I'll have an announcement on that in the coming weeks. But I'm pretty excited about it. I'd never really intentionally killed anybody on the page before. And there's certain satisfaction to that, because you walk around feeling like there's some people that you want to hurt, and and that's not a good feeling. So I'm glad to be able to take it out on paper. It was an interesting exercise to write a legal thriller, and so I'm excited about it. But so now it's my turn, Mark. When are you coming to Beaufort and moving into the guest room? And
well, I wish I was there right now.
well, you look like you're in a pretty sweet spot to be right now.
I'm pretty high up on the side of a mountain, so this is not too bad either. So my answer, John, is I will be there as soon as possible.
Do you have anything that's going to bring you our way? Maybe at the Citadel anytime soon?
Well, frighteningly, I am staring down my 25th anniversary, but that'll be next year. But I hope to get down for a football game this fall. So
good. Well, let's stay
I'll be
in touch on that.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, ladies, we have enjoyed this immensely.
This has been fun. Really.
Yes, thank you so much for your time, John. So good to see you again. And Mark, we look forward to bringing you back in the future when we read The Lioness, and we will speak to you about it. And we will let you say farewell and do a little bit of book club housekeeping and then say good night. So thank you so much again.
My pleasure. Thank you. Good night,
My
everyone.
pleasure. So nice to be with you.
Good to see you, John.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Oh, Donette, that was just so great. I loved A Southern Girl, and I am on pins and needles now to read The Lioness.
Well, so am I, and I want the legal thriller because, as I said, I love those. So that'll be good.
Right. Oh, my goodness. So book club business. Stay tuned for our next book club discussion. And for the reveal of, how to get your hands on The Lioness. Oh, yes. Lakewood by William Walsh. And that is for July.
Hi, everybody. Did you have fun?
Yes, we did.
Yes.
I thought that was awesome. Why is it when I watch, time goes by so fast, but when I'm doing it, I feel like time goes so slow? Is it just nerves? Well, I just want to let you know that people are saying they're picking up the book today, this new book. Melissa, you started, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, I'm done with that one. I'm ready for the next one. Yes.
I don't even know what's next, but I wanted to hop on. Sorry, I'm kind of in between.
No, I love it.
And just say it was interesting being behind the scenes tonight and doing the production. I learned a few things, and I just want to say, Melissa and Donette, thank you so much for being group experts and for being so dedicated to our virtual book club, even when we all have a lot of different things we can be doing right now. So I appreciate it so much. Did y'all have any closing comments? And then I will just say goodnight to you when you're ready. What did you think about tonight, Donette?
I just thoroughly enjoyed it. He answered the questions that I had and just expanded my understanding of what I had read. And I knew that there was an autobiographical aspect, but I had no idea just how close it was to his life. So that was really, and as I said, I have two family members, great nieces and nephews who are international adoption. So I was really glad to be able to talk about that.
Yeah, I love the passage that he read. Just, oh my goodness. Yeah.
Well, thank you both. So I don't have my calendar. Of course I don't, but we will be posting when we're meeting with William Walsh next. And I hope everyone is staying cool. I know we have hopefully gotten on the other side of that huge heat wave that we all experience. But Melissa and Donette, thank you for being group experts. And any of y'all that are watching this now or on replay, if you'd like to interact like Melissa and Donette did, and you're the one asking the author the questions, let me know, because the more of us that can do it, the better when I'm off traveling the world, right?
Well, happy 4th of July.
Yes.
Happy 4th of July to you two ladies. And I'm going to go ahead and, unless anybody has anything else to say, I'm going to go ahead and close this out for the night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Great to see you.